close your eyes for a second and just picture a flag.
Right, any flag.
Yeah, exactly. You're probably seeing like stripes, maybe some stars. Perhaps you're visualizing a maple leaf or a crescent moon or, the specific shades of red, white, and blue that you grew up with.
It's totally instinctual.
It really is. I mean, you know the flag of your home country, maybe even your state or your province. But what if you were tasked with designing a single flag for the entire planet?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like, what colors actually represent 8 billion people? What single symbol could possibly summarize the oceans, the continents, the sheer chaotic diversity of humanity, and just put it all onto one fluttering rectangle of cloth?
I mean, it is a massive conceptual leap.
Yeah.
You are asking a medium that was fundamentally engineered to separate people to suddenly do the exact opposite.
Right, and that paradox, that's the entire mission of our deep dive today. We're decoding the visual language of humanity. We've got this incredible stack of sources today.
We really do. Yeah, and we're going to look at what happens when you try to strip away national borders. Like, when we try to represent a shared human identity, or even just the abstract concept of global peace.
Right, like what symbols do we actually reach for?
Exactly. And more importantly, why do we reach for them? Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the timeline of this whole attempt is filled with people you really would not expect to be graphic designers.
No, not at all.
Like, we're looking at this crazy lineage of peace activists, eccentric farmers from the American Midwest, sailors, and science fiction writers.
That's wild.
Right. All of them looked up and attempted to solve the exact same visual puzzle.
But before we look at their solutions, I think we need to look at the canvas they were working with. Because to understand why a flag for Earth is such a heavy lift, we have to talk about what a flag is fundamentally designed to do in the first place.
Yeah, that raises an important question. If we dig into the history of vexillology...
That's the study of flags, right?
Exactly, the scientific and scholarly study of flags. We find that they are, at their core, tools of division.
Yeah.
I mean, they originated on the battlefield. Picture, like, two ancient armies facing off.
Okay, picturing it.
In the smoke, the noise, the absolute chaos of war, you need a highly visible, brightly colored piece of fabric held high in the air.
Just to see through the dust.
Exactly, to identify who is us and who is them. I mean, a flag tells a soldier who to rally around and, well, who to swing a sword at.
Right. It's a literal territorial marker.
Yes, it says, this land belongs to the people flying this color. So to create a flag for everyone is this huge structural contradiction.
You're taking a tool of war and trying to force it to, like, mandate peace.
Which is the core graphic design challenge. Like,
Yeah.
How do you create a symbol of ultimate unity using a medium that is hardwired for tribalism?
Right.
How do you visually say us when there is no them?
That is such a good way to put it. And, the first time humanity seriously grappled with that specific question on a global scale was when we finally managed to leave the planet.
Oh, absolutely. The space age changed everything.
Yeah. The late 1960s and early 1970s saw this massive, sudden push for an Earth flag. And the guy leading the charge was this peace activist named John McConnell.
McConnell is such a pivotal figure in this movement. So in 1969, he proposed his design for the Earth flag. And what stands out about McConnell's approach is that he refused to draw a symbol.
Really? He didn't draw anything?
Nope. He didn't sketch a globe or a dove or anything like that. He relied entirely on photography.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, his very first versions used a photograph taken by the crew of Apollo 10. This was on May 18th, 1969.
Okay.
It was a bit simplified initially, like he used white outlines of the weather clouds over a light blue circle.
But wait, putting a literal photograph on a flag,
Yeah.
doesn't that break every single rule of traditional flag design?
Oh, completely.
Right, because you don't see, like, photographs of eagles on national flags. You see highly stylized drawings of eagles.
Exactly. It absolutely shatters traditional rules. Like, good vexillology dictates that a flag should be simple enough for a child to draw from memory.
Which a cloud pattern definitely is not.
Right. A complex photograph of weather systems fails that test immediately. But the historical context matters here. Humanity had never seen its own home from the outside before.
It must have been such a shock.
The psychological shockwaves of the Apollo program were immense. So McConnell wasn't interested in adhering to the old rules of heraldry, He wanted to capture the overview effect.
Oh, the overview effect,
Yeah, that cognitive shift astronauts report when they see the Earth hanging in the void, just completely devoid of drawn borders.
And a few years later, humanity delivered an even better photograph for him to use. Because on December 7th, 1972, the crew of Apollo 17 took the famous blue marble shot.
The quintessential Earth photo.
Yes. They were on their way to the moon, the sun was right behind them, and they captured this stunning, fully illuminated, incredibly detailed shot of the Earth.
You could literally see the cyclone weather patterns over the Indian Ocean.
Exactly. So McConnell updated his flag in 1973 to feature that exact photograph, just slapping it right in the middle of a dark blue background.
And the timing and cultural positioning of McConnell's work were just brilliant. He didn't just design the flag, he gave it a stage.
How so?
Well, he debuted the original design at a Moonwatch event in Central Park, July 20, 1969.
Oh, the moon landing.
Right. You have all these New Yorkers gathered to celebrate the Apollo 11 crew taking the first steps on the lunar surface, and there is McConnell waving a flag of the very dirt they were standing on.
That is amazing PR right there. And he parlayed that momentum into organizing the first Earth Day in San Francisco in 1970, right?
He did. His flags were flying everywhere at that event, which cemented a permanent association between his design and the environmental movement.
It even went back up into space.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, our sources noted that in 1992, a Russian cosmonaut, Anatoly Berezovoy, actually carried McConnell's Earth flag with him during his orbital mission.
That's incredible. But, you know, what's fascinating here is that while McConnell was turning environmental photography into a political banner, someone else was looking at the exact same problem and coming up with a wildly different solution.
Oh, this is the farmer, right?
Yes. In May 1970, James W. Cattle proposed his own flag of planet Earth. And Cattle was not a peace activist in San Francisco. He was a farmer from Homer, Illinois.
I love this contrast so much.
Yeah.
Because Cattle's design is the polar opposite of the blue marble. It is intensely minimalist.
Completely abstract.
Yeah. He used a solid black background to represent the dark void of outer space, and then right in the center, he placed a blue circle for the Earth. Over on the left side, slightly overlapping the blue circle, is this massive segment of a yellow circle.
Which is the sun.
Right. And then tucked into the bottom right corner is a tiny white circle representing the moon. Just pure, simple geometry.
It's beautiful, and it really highlights a profound philosophical divide in how we view ourselves. Cattle, a farmer who likely spent his whole life looking up at the sky to judge the weather and the seasons,
Yeah.
he created a flag that looked outward. His flag is not really about the Earth itself. It's about the cosmos.
Right. It's our address.
Exactly. It represents Earth's mathematical, physical address in the solar system. It maps our relationship to our local star and our satellite.
Meanwhile, McConnell, the activist,
Yeah.
he created a flag that looked inward. Like he wanted us to stare directly at the fragile, swirling beauty of our own atmosphere to inspire us to stop destroying it.
Right.
It's like choosing a profile picture for the entire human race.
Huh, that's a great way to put it.
Do we use the literal, highly detailed selfie, McConnell's blue marble, which shows all our flaws and weather pattern? Or do we use the minimalist graphic logo, Cattle's circles, that just shows our location in the neighborhood?
And it's interesting because different scientific communities gravitated toward those different philosophies immediately. McConnell's flag was universally adopted by environmentalists. But Cattle's geometric flag became incredibly popular with SETI.
The search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Exactly. Researchers at SETI adopted it enthusiastically. It flew prominently at the Ohio State University Radio Observatory.
And there's a deeply touching footnote to that in the sources. When the legendary astronomer Carl Sagan died in December of 1996, that observatory lowered Cattle's flag to half-mast in his honor.
Which makes perfect logical sense for SETI, if you think about it. If your entire organizational goal is to communicate with an extraterrestrial intelligence, a photograph of Earth's clouds is totally meaningless.
Yeah, an alien civilization doesn't care if it's raining in London.
Exactly. But the geometric proportional relationship between a rocky planet, its yellow dwarf star, and its single large satellite, that is a universal mathematical language. Cattle basically designed a flag that functions as a cosmic calling card.
Both of those flags, though, the blue marble and the geometry, they were born from the space age. They were these grassroots attempts to capture this sudden realization that we're all trapped on the spaceship together.
Right, the spaceship Earth concept.
Yeah, but grassroots activists waving flags in Central Park is one thing. Here's where it gets really interesting. What happens when the people who actually own the tanks and draw the borders try to design a flag together?
Right, the institutions.
Does institutionalizing peace ruin the art?
It certainly shifts the priority. You move from inspiring the public to managing the bureaucracy. When international organizations design flags, they're dealing with the messy, highly sensitive reality of diplomacy.
Every pixel is a political choice.
Every pixel is a potential geopolitical incident. We can see this starting with the precursor to the United Nations, the League of Nations.
Right, the League of Nations was founded right after World War I to supposedly prevent another global conflict. But they didn't even have a semi-official flag until 1939, literally right as the world was falling into World War II.
And their 1939 design was so mathematically rigid. It featured a white background with a blue pentagon in the center. Inside that pentagon was a white five-pointed star, and nested inside that star was another five-pointed star.
It sounds like an occult puzzle or something. Why the obsession with the number 5?
Well, the symbolism was incredibly literal. The two five-pointed stars represented the 5 inhabited continents and what they, at the time, termed the 5 human races.
Okay, that makes sense.
But they also explicitly wrote out the text League of Nations in English and Société des Nations in French above and below the emblem, just to make sure absolutely no one misunderstood the two official languages of the body.
Which, writing words on a flag is another one of those cardinal sins of vexillology, isn't it?
Oh, big time.
Because if a flag is flapping in the wind or flying backward from a mast, words just look like scrambled nonsense.
Right. It defeats the purpose of long-distance identification. Well, the League of Nations dissolved after failing to stop World War II, and its components rolled into the newly formed United Nations. The UN flag is arguably the most famous international symbol in existence today, adopted in 1947.
Right.
And the UN flag is just an absolute masterclass in diplomatic risk management. They chose a sky blue background.
Deliberately avoiding the aggressive red of war, I'm saying.
Exactly, no red. And they placed a white emblem in the center. That emblem is an azimuthal, equidistant projection of the world map, surrounded by a wreath of crossed olive branches.
Okay, let's break that down for a second. For anyone who isn't a huge cartography nerd, what exactly does azimuthal equidistant projection actually mean? And why did they use it?
Good question. So whenever you try to flatten a 3D globe into a 2D image, you have to distort something.
Right, you can't peel an orange and make it lay perfectly flat.
Exactly. You either distort the size of the continents, their shape, or the distance between them. An azimuthal equidistant projection is a map that maintains accurate distances from one specific center point to all other points. The crucial genius choice the UN made was the perspective. They centered the map precisely on the North Pole.
Ah, so you're looking straight down at the top of the Earth.
Yes. From the North Pole, the globe expands outward to 60 degrees south latitude, and it's bisected by the prime meridian and the international dateline. What this does, geometrically, is enforce diplomatic equality.
I see. Because think about the alternatives. If you center a map on the Atlantic Ocean, Europe and the Americas look huge, and they completely dominate the center, splitting Asia in half.
Right.
And if you center it on the Pacific, Asia and the Americas dominate, and Europe gets shoved to the edges. By looking down from the North Pole, nobody gets to be in the center.
Exactly. Every nation in the Northern Hemisphere is arranged in a ring, equally distant from the focal point. Nobody is visually dominant.
It's mathematically fair, like mathematical fairness disguised as graphic design.
And it was so effective, so universally accepted as a neutral symbol of human achievement, that during the planning for NASA's lunar landings in the 1960s, there was a serious high-level debate about whether the astronauts should plant the United Nations flag on the moon instead of the United States flag.
Wait, really? NASA considered flying the UN flag on the moon.
They absolutely did.
That is wild to think about. I mean, obviously the domestic politics of the Cold War eventually ensured that the Stars and Stripes went into the lunar dust, but the fact that it was even a debate really shows the power of the UN design.
It really does.
Still, though,
Right.
I look at the UN flag or the League of Nations flag, and I feel nothing.
Right.
Like they feel like designed by committee, they're mathematically fair, like the UN, making sure no country's in the middle. But do they actually stir any emotion in you? They're cold.
That is the trade-off. When you prioritize diplomacy, you often sacrifice passion. But there is one institutional flag that manages to navigate the political minefield while still generating immense emotional resonance.
The Olympic Games flag.
The Olympic flag. The International Olympic Committee represents thousands of athletes from over 200 sovereign states and territories. The co-founder of the modern games, Pierre de Coubertin, designed the symbol in 1913, and it officially debuted in 1914.
5 interlocking rings on a crisp white background.
Yes. Blue, yellow, black, green, and red.
Now, the standard interpretation is that the 5 rings stand for the 5 inhabited continents taking part in the games, right? Like Europe, Asia, Africa, Oceania, and the Americas. But our sources point out that the actual genius of Coubertin's design isn't the rings themselves, it's the color palette.
Exactly. Coubertin realized that assigning a specific color to a specific continent was a fast track to a political disaster.
Oh yeah, who gets to be blue? Who gets stuck with black?
Right. Instead of doing that, he basically hacked the concept of global representation. He chose those specific 6 colors, meaning the white background plus the 5 colored rings, because at least one of those colors appears in every single national flag in the world.
That is such an elegant, brilliant solution. Let's say you're Swedish. Your national colors are blue and yellow. Boom, they are right there in the rings.
Right.
You're Greek, blue and white. French, British, American. Red, white, and blue. Brazilian, green and yellow. He managed to include everyone on the planet without having to actually draw a single border.
By shifting the medium of representation from geography to color theory, Coubertin completely bypassed the nightmare of political cartography. The Olympic flag doesn't show where you live, it reflects the colors you already rally around.
That's a great point.
It's a symbol that manages to be universally inclusive through abstract distillation rather than literal depiction.
It's incredibly warm compared to the UN's polar map.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, the UN and the Olympics are institutions that operate under the assumption of a relatively stable, peaceful international order, right? They're flags of administration. But what happens when that order violently breaks down? How do people use flags to actually demand peace or to signal a desperate desire for an end to violence? That brings us to the fascinating evolution of the peace flag, starting with the absolute oldest one in the book, the blank white flag.
Yeah, the white flag is deeply, deeply ingrained in our collective psychological history. Across almost the entire globe, it is recognized as a flag of surrender, a truce, or a request for a ceasefire.
Goes back a long way, right?
A really long way. The very first recorded mention of a white flag being used in this specific context dates all the way back to the Eastern Han Dynasty in China between 8025 and 220.
Wow.
And centuries later, it was notably used by the anti-war movement during the American Civil War in 1861.
But waving a blank piece of white cloth on a battlefield essentially means we yield or, please stop shooting at us. It's an operational signal. It's an action. The jump from using white to mean surrender to using white as a broader political symbol for universal peace seems to happen much later, right around the late 19th century.
Yeah, it formalized at the Third Universal Peace Congress in Rome in 1891. A designer named Henry Pettit devised a generalized peace flag concept, and it wasn't a new design from scratch.
Okay.
His idea was actually really simple. You take your existing home nation's flag, and you just stitch a thick white border around the entire thing. The white border was meant to signify the nation's commitment to nonviolent conflict resolution.
See, I have a question about this. This was adopted by groups like the American Peace Society and the Universal Peace Union. But think about the psychology of that image. If you take the French tricolor, or the American Stars and Stripes, and you put a thick white border around it, doesn't that almost look like you're putting a quarantine around nationalism?
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Like you're boxing it in. It visually implies that the aggressive nature of the nation-state needs to be trapped inside a boundary of peace. It's almost like a warning label.
That hits on a profound psychological debate within the early peace movement, actually. Is peace merely the containment of national aggression? Is peace just the absence of war? A white border suggests that peace is an external restraint placed upon normal state behavior. It's a boundary.
Right. And some designers clearly felt that an empty border just wasn't enough, that peace needed to be a more active, complex, constructive effort, which leads us to what might genuinely be the most over-designed, chaotic flag in human history.
Oh, yes. The pro-Concordia labor flag.
From the 1890s. Tell us about this thing.
This was invented by an expatriate American named Cora Slocum, who was also known as the Countess de Brazza. She wanted a universal peace flag, and she started sensibly enough with 3 upright vertical bands: yellow, purple, and white.
So far, so good.
Right. But she could not stop there. On the middle band, she envisioned this highly complex, layered symbol.
Just try to picture this flying on a pole, you guys. It featured a shield. Sitting on top of the shield were a man's and a woman's clasped hands.
It's already getting crowded.
Oh, it gets worse. Those hands were being sustained by a pair of dove wings. Hovering above the wings was a white star, The shield itself was designed to be blank so that it could contain the specific logo of whichever organization was flying the flag or even their enrollment number.
An enrollment number on a flag.
And if that wasn't enough, below the shield, there could be a ribbon with the motto Pro Concordia Labor, which means for peace I work. Alternatively, you could hang a white streamer from the blue flag staff with the motto on it, topped by yet another star.
That is just a vexillological nightmare. Like, think about the physics of a flag.
Right.
It is a piece of fabric hoisted high in the air, folding over on itself, flapping in 30-mile-per-hour winds. It needs to be instantly recognizable from 100 yards away. You cannot possibly read an enrollment number or distinguish the nuance of clasped hands resting on dove wings when a flag is moving.
It's a beautiful mural, maybe, but it is a terrible flag.
And the history reflects that failure of physical design. It was briefly adopted by the International Council of Women in 1896, but by 1904, the movement realized it was completely unworkable in the real world.
Go figure.
So they stripped away the shield, the clasped hands, the wings, the stars, the ribbons, and the motto. They simplified it back down to just a basic yellow, purple, and white tricolor.
Which proves a fundamental rule, I guess.
Yeah.
Visual clarity must win over complex symbolism. Surrender is an action, which is easy to convey with a white cloth. Peace is a complex, multi-layered state of being, which is incredibly hard to draw.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really shows the struggle to define peace visually. Is peace just the absence of war, like the white border, or is it a complex, active effort, like the clasped hands and dove wings?
Right. And you see a similar desire to protect the complex structures of human society with the 1935 Roerich Pact Banner of Peace.
Oh, yeah.
Nicholas Roerich proposed an international treaty dedicated to protecting artistic institutions, scientific buildings, and historical monuments during times of war. The pact was signed in 1935, and it had its own specific banner to mark those buildings. It was essentially a target in reverse, saying, do not bomb this building. It belongs to the shared culture of humanity.
And all these early attempts, the white borders, the complicated shields, the treaty banners, they show a world trying to establish legal and moral boundaries against industrial warfare. But as we move further into the 20th century, the aesthetic shifts dramatically. We see the introduction of a motif that would come to completely dominate peace movements globally: the rainbow.
Yeah, the rainbow as a symbol of global unity has a surprisingly deep history. It didn't just start in the 1970s. In 1913, a Methodist minister from Youngstown, Ohio, named James William Van Kirk, designed what is considered the first known world peace flag of the earth.
And his design is quite striking.
It really is.
Van Kirk's design featured rainbow stripes on the left side of the flag: red, green, yellow, orange, blue, purple, and pink. And then to the right of those colorful stripes was a brown globe featuring a coordinate grid of latitude and longitude lines.
Okay.
The globe had a white horizontal stripe across the middle, and thin white stripes connected the globe directly to the colored stripes of the rainbow. All of this was placed on a dark blue background, surrounded by 46 white stars.
And Van Kirk didn't just design this thing and leave it in a sketch pad. He had it made and took it on peace tours through Europe in 1913 and then again in 1929. He traveled the world promoting a concept he called the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God.
It was dedicated.
Very. The Universal Peace Congress eventually adopted his design as its official world peace flag, and the American Peace Society picked it up too.
The concept of the visual spectrum really took hold in the public consciousness after that. In 1938, a group in Minnesota called the World Peace Association unveiled something they called the Brotherhood flag.
Oh, this one.
Yeah, this one was much more straightforward than Van Kirk's. It was just 5 equal horizontal stripes of red, white, brown, yellow, and black. Their stated purpose was that each stripe represented one of the 5 major groups of the human race. They believed that displaying these colors equally together would promote unity, equality, and respect for international law.
This is where the visual lineage gets really fascinating to me, because this 1938 Brotherhood flag was heavily carried at peace marches throughout the 1960s. And historically, our sources note that this exact flag may have helped inspire the designer Gilbert Baker when he created the LGBT plus Rainbow Pride flag in 1978.
It's a direct through line.
It is. The visual language of horizontal colored stripes representing diverse human groups coming together became firmly established as the go-to aesthetic for inclusivity.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the Italian pace flag, arguably the most successful, wide-reaching grassroots peace flag in modern history.
Pace being the Italian word for peace.
Right. The pace flag was first used in Italy at a peace march in 1961. It was actually inspired by similar multicolored flags that had been used in the UK during demonstrations against nuclear weapons. Interestingly, a previous version of those anti-nuclear flags had featured a dove drawn by Pablo Picasso.
Oh, wow.
But the Italian pace flag settled on the simple, striking rainbow design.
The most common variety has 7 colors, and the order is very specific. Purple, blue, azure, green, yellow, orange, and red. So it starts with purple at the top and goes down to red at the bottom. And right across the middle, emblazoned in bold, unmistakable white letters, is the word PACE.
It's very iconic.
I find the inclusion of purple at the top really interesting, too, because historically purple is almost non-existent in national flags.
That's true.
Right. The dye was just too expensive in the ancient world. Seeing it so prominently on a grassroots flag feels like a modern luxury being used for a political statement.
Absolutely. The flag remained a consistent, if somewhat regional symbol for decades. It was a staple at left-wing and pacifist rallies in Italy. But then came the year 2002, and the launch of the campaign known as Pace da tutti I balconi, which translates to peace from every balcony.
This campaign started as a public protest against the impending military invasion of Iraq. And the sheer scale of what happened next is staggering. Millions of these flags were suddenly flown from residential balconies in cities all across Italy.
Millions.
Yeah. To give you an idea of the suddenness of this explosion, there was a textile producer named Franco Belsico. According to Amnesty International, for 18 years, Belsico had produced a steady trickle of about 1,000 pace flags a year for various local organizations. Suddenly, in 2002, he was hit with a demand in the range of millions. He literally could not print them fast enough.
The visual impact of transforming an entire city's architecture into a billboard for peace cannot be overstated. Though it is worth noting that during this massive explosion in popularity, the flag's use did meet with some friction from the Italian LGBT community.
Oh, right, because of the similarity.
Yes. The 7-color pace flag, with purple at the top, is visually very similar to the 6-color gay pride flag, which has red at the top and lacks the azure stripe. The LGBT pride flag had started being used heavily in Italy a couple of years prior, especially around the 2000 World Pride celebration in Rome, so there was some tension and confusion over visual overlap in the public square.
The pace flag movement also kicked off this wild trend of creating these flags on a record-breaking, massive physical scale.
That's the massive ones.
Yes. In 2009, an association in Lecce, Italy, made a flag that was 21 by 40 meters. In 2012, a Belgian peace organization in Ghent unveiled one that was 30 by 50 meters. But the biggest one mentioned in our research was made in Prato, Tuscany in 2003. It was approximately 1,000 meters long and 13 meters wide, carried by thousands of people through the streets to protest the Iraq War.
That's astonishing.
That is a flag over 1 kilometer long.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? When we look at these massive physical displays or the millions of balcony flags hanging over the streets of Rome or Milan, we have to evaluate their actual function. What does a flag do in that context? Let me jump in and play devil's advocate here.
Please do.
If you hang a pace flag from your apartment balcony, or you spend your Saturday helping to carry a kilometer-long piece of rainbow fabric through a Tuscan town, does it actually change foreign policy? Like, does a prime minister or a president look out the window at a balcony and say, well, the people have spoken, call off the fighter jets? Or is it just performative? Is it just a way to signal to your neighbors that you're one of the good guys without actually doing anything?
Well, it is highly unlikely that a piece of fabric on a balcony will directly stop a tank or alter a finalized military strategy. However, looking at it only through the lens of foreign policy misses its true power. A flag fundamentally changes domestic psychology. It visualizes public consensus in a way that opinion polls or newspaper editorials simply cannot. Think about the isolation of political dissent. If you privately oppose a war that your government is ramping up for, you might feel entirely alone. You might think you're the crazy one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But when you walk down your street to get a coffee, and you see a pace flag hanging from every third balcony, that isolation is instantly broken.
Oh, that makes total sense. It turns a private, invisible thought into a highly visible, shared physical environment.
Exactly. It alters the political weather of a city. It tells the citizens you are not alone in this thought. It builds a sense of overwhelming physical solidarity that politicians eventually have to reckon with, even if it doesn't stop the immediate deployment of troops.
It turns an entire neighborhood into a physical petition. But, hanging a flag from your own balcony is still a relatively safe, comfortable form of protest. You go back inside and watch TV. Our research also details people who use flags not just to protest a specific war, but to entirely sever themselves from the international system. These are the individual defectors, the people who design flags for the stateless.
The story of George Dibburn is one of the most compelling narratives we found on this front. The year is 1937. Dibburn is a sailor, and he is ordered to fly the flag of Nazi Germany on his yacht, which was named the Te-Rapunga. He point-blank refuses.
Yeah, I mean, put yourself in his shoes. Refusing to fly the swastika as a German citizen in the late 1930s is not a casual political statement. It is a massive, incredibly dangerous, life-altering decision.
Exactly, and because of his strict pacifism and his absolute refusal to take up arms for any country, let alone the Nazi regime, he was eventually denied residency in New Zealand in 1939. He became widely known in the press as a man without a country. He had no legal protection anywhere. So in 1940, while docked in San Francisco, Dibburn decided to simply invent his own nationality. He created his own passport, declaring himself a friend of all peoples and a citizen of the world. And crucially, he designed his own Citizen of the World flag to fly on his ship's mast.
Dibburn's flag is visually striking, and it is heavy with deliberate meaning. He wrote out the symbolism behind every single choice. It featured a pure white ground, which he said stood for equal rights, but he clarified not just generic equality, but equal rights for men to evolve according to their own individuality.
Very specific.
Yeah. Cutting across that white ground was a red cross of St. George. He said this represented the red cross of freedom and of pain because he believed humans only truly learn through the pain that experience brings.
In the center of the cross, he placed a dark blue circle. That circle stood for the brotherhood of man and also literally for a planet like Earth. In his writings, he stated, "Though we fight like brothers, we must grow a loyalty to our one family if we are to survive."
That's beautiful.
And finally, tucked into the upper left corner, there was a single blue star. Dibburn believed that the aim of every person should be to become a self-shining light, a star navigating their own path. It was a deeply spiritual, intensely personal flag.
It's one thing to wave a peace flag at a parade in your hometown surrounded by friends. It is another thing entirely to cast off the mooring lines and sail out into international waters on a small yacht, flying a homemade flag that has zero legal backing by any military or government on Earth.
It's incredibly risky.
He knew it made him a target. He knew he had no Navy coming to rescue him if he was boarded. That is an incredible level of bravery, or maybe just profound, unyielding stubbornness.
Well, it highlights a vital, often overlooked reality about flags. They're inherently tied to legal protection and state violence. When a commercial or private ship flies a national flag, it operates under the legal protection and the implicit military threat of that specific nation. By designing his own flag and renouncing his citizenship, Dibburn was deliberately highlighting the absurdity of the nation-state system. He was forcing the world to ask, why do I only have rights because of a piece of paper issued by a government I fundamentally disagree with?
And he wasn't the only one to take this drastic step. The research also highlights Gary Davis, an American actor and passionate peace activist who formally renounced his U.S. citizenship in 1948 in Paris.
He basically walked into the embassy and handed it back.
Yep. In 1953, he founded something called the World Service Authority.
The World Service Authority is a nonprofit organization that promotes the concept of world citizenship. They actually issue unofficial, fictitious documents like world passports. Some people have surprisingly managed to travel on them, though mostly they are rejected.
Right.
Davis created a flag for the organization, a yellow background featuring a white globe with a green outline and coordinate lines. Inside the globe is a green figure of a human, stretching its limbs out to touch the absolute boundaries of the Earth.
Davis and Dibburn, they're pointing out a glaring flaw in global society. Human rights are currently granted by geography. Your rights, your safety, your ability to travel depend entirely on the flag you happen to be born under. They use their homemade flags to argue that human rights should be granted by mere existence. They rejected the assigned tribalism and tried to sow their own universalism.
But as we move closer to the present day, we see modern designers trying to represent that universalism in increasingly abstract or sometimes incredibly literal ways. We enter an era of maximalism, minimalism, and eventually science fiction.
Let's start with maximalist approach. In 1988, a designer named Paul Carroll proposed the world flag. And Carroll's solution to the problem of representing everyone was to literally just include everyone.
It's quite the approach.
He took the flags of 159 member states of the United Nations and stitched them all together. He placed them side by side, framing a Dymaxion map of the world right in the center. By 1992, he updated it to include 230 flags, all the national flags, the UN flag, and the flags of self-governing territories.
He kept updating it too. In 2006, 2008, and 2011, he rearranged it to accommodate changes in national borders, new countries forming, and political shifts.
Wait, let me stop you at Dimaction map. We talked about the UN's polar projection earlier, but what on earth is a Dimaction map?
Oh, it's fascinating. The Dimaction map was invented by the visionary architect Buckminster Fuller. Imagine taking a globe, and instead of trying to flatten it into a rectangle,
Which hugely distorts land masses like Greenland and Antarctica.
right. Instead of that, you project the globe onto a 20-sided geometric shape, an icosahedron. Then you unfold that shape so it lays flat. The result is a map that looks heavily fragmented, almost like a spilled puzzle, but it preserves the relative size and shape of the continents almost perfectly, and it doesn't have a distinct up or down.
Okay, so Carroll takes this mathematically poor Dimaction map and surrounds it with 230 national flags. I have to be honest, Carroll's flag sounds like a chaotic quilt.
It's a lot to look at.
If the goal of an Earth flag is unity, taking 230 different symbols of division, borders, and blood, and sewing them onto one bedsheet doesn't necessarily scream, "We are one." It kind of highlights how fractured and deeply divided we are. It is a visual representation of borders, not the erasure of them.
I agree, it is a visually exhausting design, but you could argue it reflects the actual messy political reality of a world divided into sovereign states, rather than an idealized utopian vision of a world without them. However, contrast Carroll's overwhelming quilt with the extreme minimalism that emerged a few decades later. In 2016, a photographer named Thomas Mandel introduced the One World flag.
This one is conceptually wild. Mandel decided that a traditional round globe on a flag or a flag with a static solid background was impractical for a dynamic, constantly shifting planet. So his flag features a single solid blue dot in the center. But the feel of the flag, the background fabric itself, is completely transparent.
The idea is that as the flag flies on the pole, you look through it and see the sky or the trees or the cityscape behind it. The changing background literally becomes the flag, representing an ever-changing, living Earth. Mandel actually began distributing these worldwide in 2019 to try and raise planetary solidarity.
Conceptually,
Yeah.
that is brilliant poetry. It is a beautiful thought. But practically, if you run a transparent piece of plastic up a 50-foot flagpole on a cloudy Tuesday, it is invisible.
Yeah, you wouldn't see it.
No one is going to see it. It works incredibly well as a conceptual art piece in a modern museum, but it fails completely as a masthead.
I will concede that visibility is a major issue there. But the poetic intent is to force the viewer to look at their actual environment rather than a drawing of it. Still, if you want a visible minimalist design, we see a better approach in 2019 when Dutch designer Thijs Boonkamp proposed the blue dot flag.
Right, Boonkamp was directly inspired by Carl Sagan's famous pale blue dot photograph, that image taken by Voyager 1 showing Earth as a tiny pixel of light suspended in a sunbeam. Boonkamp designed a solid, pale green field representing the planet's fragile biodiversity with a simple, stark blue circle in the center representing the Earth. He registered it as a nonprofit specifically to raise awareness about climate change and ecological degradation.
But the design that truly captured the internet's imagination and perhaps looks the most realistically toward our actual future came out a bit earlier, in 2015. A Swedish designer named Oscar Pernefelt created the international flag of planet Earth.
This flag is visually stunning. It features a dark blue background representing the deep water that covers most of our planet and sustains all known life. In the very center are 7 white interlocking rings. They form a mesmerizing geometric shape known as the flower of life.
It's a very ancient pattern.
Yeah. You can interpret the 7 rings as representing the 7 continents, but the intersecting continuous geometry represents the absolute connection of everything on the planet to everything else. You can't pull one ring out without breaking the whole structure.
What is amazing about the history of this flag is that Pernefelt originally designed it simply as a project for his graduate thesis at Beckmans College of Design in Stockholm.
Wait, it was a homework assignment.
Basically. But he put together a highly professional press kit, and it absolutely exploded online. His website received over 500,000 views in a matter of 24 hours. And the reason it went so viral is that the media and the public immediately attached the design to a very specific impending scenario, human travel to Mars.
Yes. The discussion immediately shifted from what flag do we fly at a UN climate summit to When an astronaut steps out of a lander and puts their boot on Martian soil, what flag do they plant in the red dust? If an international coalition of space agencies sends a crew to Mars, it would be wildly inappropriate to plant an American or Chinese or European flag. Pronefeldt's flower of life on a blue field became the theoretical, internet-ordained favorite for that future moment.
Which is exactly why science fiction has been playing with this specific graphic design concept for decades. Sci-fi acts as a testing ground for sociological and political concepts.
It totally does.
When writers imagine a future where humanity has expanded into the solar system or out into the wider galaxy, they have to figure out what our collective logo is. How do we brand humanity? And looking at how pop culture solves the flag of Earth problem is incredibly revealing.
It shows us exactly how we view our own trajectory. Let's look at the behemoth, the Star Trek franchise. Over the decades, Star Trek has shown several evolving versions of the United Earth flag, depicting the era as humanity unites to eventually form the United Federation of Planets. In the 1991 movie Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, which is set in the year 2293, the flag has red and blue stripes, a white triangle, and an emblem showing a globe with a rising 16-pointed yellow star behind it.
But as the various shows went on and production design evolved, the flags became more streamlined. In Star Trek, Enterprise, set earlier in 2154, and later in modern shows like Discovery and Picard, the United Earth flag consistently features a golden map of the world on a blue or white background, accompanied by a single golden olive branch.
So it's very UN-inspired.
Exactly. It is highly deliberately reminiscent of the actual UN flag we discussed earlier, just stylized in gold and dark blue to look a bit more regal and futuristic.
In the fourth season of Discovery, which is set way, way in the future in the year 3190, the emblem evolves again to represent the entire solar system, showing orbital rings and other planetary bodies moving entirely past just Earth geography.
But not all science fiction takes that noble, diplomatic, utopian UN route. I appreciate the deeply cynical take in Futurama, the animated comedy series set in the 3000s.
Oh, freebie.
Yes. Earth is united under a single world government, and their flag is literally just the current flag of the United States. But instead of 50 stars in the blue canton in the top corner, it is just a picture of the Earth, with the Americas prominently featured dead center. In the show, they affectionately call it Old Freebie.
It is a hilarious, biting commentary on American hegemony and the idea that globalization is just Americanization.
Then you have Japanese animation. In the legendary 1979 anime Mobile Suit Gundam, the Earth Federation uses a dark blue banner with a golden rhombus and a light blue globe in the center. Again, relying on sharp geometry anchoring the simple blue sphere.
And one of the most brilliant, thought-out recent examples is from the show The Expanse, set in the 24th century. In that universe, the United Nations actually governs Earth, the Moon, and various colonies throughout the system. Their flag is a direct, logical modification of the real-world UN flag.
How did they change it?
It has the exact same polar projection map and olive branches. But because humanity has altered the planet, the map has missing rings and altered shapes to denote rising sea levels that have changed the coastlines.
That's a great detail.
And the entire emblem is surrounded by 8 smaller circles, showing the different phases of the moon, representing our expansion to our closest neighbor.
What is fascinating about all these science fiction examples, as well as Pronefeldt's Mars flag, is the overarching trend they reveal. As humanity theoretically gets closer to actual, sustained interplanetary travel, our fictional and proposed flags become less about human political borders and more about the unavoidable biological, astronomical, and mathematical facts of our existence.
Right, like we use the phases of the moon.
The orbits of the planets, the geometric flower of life, the pale blue dot in the void. As the scale of our existence expands, our symbols have to strip away the petty, invisible divisions of geography.
It is an incredible journey of design and intent. We started this deep dive looking at how people tried to summarize the world, and we've seen the entire spectrum of human hope and anxiety. We've seen Henry Pettit just slapping a white border around national flags to contain their aggression.
And the Countess de Brazza trying to draw clasped hands, doves, and mottos all over a purple banner.
We've seen the clean geometry of an Illinois farmer, the vulnerable environmental photography of John McConnell, the massive kilometer-long rainbow pasty fabrics flooding the ancient streets of Italy, the desperate handmade symbols of sailors without a country, and the sleek abstract logos of our sci-fi futures.
All of these designs, despite their vast visual differences and varying degrees of practical success, share the exact same underlying motivation: They were all attempts to weave a single, cohesive human story out of billions of individual, loud, and sometimes violently conflicting threads.
Yeah.
They represent a deep-seated desire to find a visual shorthand for our shared existence on this rock.
But before we wrap up, I know you have a thought about all this, specifically regarding our push toward the stars and flags like Pernefeld's Mars design. It ties back to the very first thing we talked about.
It does. It goes back to what a flag fundamentally is. We established that flags were invented so that armies could tell who was an ally and who was an enemy from across a smoky battlefield. They are tools of distinction.
Right.
Therefore, a flag is essentially a tool of exclusion. It defines an us by explicitly and visibly rejecting a them.
Right. It draws a line in the sand.
So, if humanity eventually adopts a single unified flag of Earth, whether it's the blue marble photograph or the genospecific flower of life or a transparent fabric with a blue dot, who is the them we were trying to distinguish ourselves from?
Wow.
If there are no more national enemies to identify, does the creation of a true planetary Earth flag imply that we are unconsciously preparing to meet someone else out there in the dark? Are we designing an Earth flag because we instinctively feel the psychological need to say, this is us, to whatever else might be watching?
That is a chilling and incredible thought to leave on. Are we making a planetary flag to finally unite ourselves, or are we just making a bigger territorial marker to identify ourselves to the rest of the universe? I want to thank you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you walk down the street or watch an international sporting event or pass a local government building, I encourage you to really look at the flags flying above you. Don't just see them as colored cloth flapping in the wind. See them for what they really are. Codified arguments about who belongs, who doesn't, and exactly where we think we are going. We will catch you next time.